What, is he out of his mind? What kind of idiot would put balls?
Jesse, do you think that's loving or caring?
Before streaming, before reboots, before the word sitcom got 100 new meanings, one house on a San Francisco street taught a generation how to laugh through hard times. This is the story of the people who lived in that house, on screen and off. Some are still with us, still making us smile. Others left too soon, but never really left the room. Grab a seat at the Tanner kitchen table. This is going to take a while because there's a lot of family to catch up with. Every family sitcom needs a heart, and this one had Bob Saget. He didn't play a perfect dad. He played a nervous, overprotective, occasionally obsessive about cleaning dad, and that's exactly why it worked. Saget was in his early 30s when he stepped into Danny Tanner's shoes, a widower raising 3 girls with the help of his brother-in-law and best friend. What made the performance land wasn't the jokes. It was how easily Saget could pivot from goofy to genuinely tender in the same scene, usually right before a hug and a life lesson. Off camera, Saget lived almost a double life. Filthy, no-holds-barred stand-up comedy paired with the squeaky clean image of America's funniest home videos, a combination that became a running joke among his fans for decades. He also lent his voice to an older, wiser version of a very different sitcom dad figure, narrating How I Met Your Mother from the future. He passed away in early 2022 after an accidental fall, and the tributes that followed, from castmates, comedians, and strangers alike, proved something. People didn't just watch Danny Tanner, they felt like he was theirs. John Stamos almost didn't take the role. He reportedly thought Jesse was a one-note leather jacket joke on paper. Instead, Jesse became the emotional backbone of half the show's best storylines, a musician forced to grow into fatherhood, a rebel who fell hard for responsibility, and eventually, a father of twins himself. Stamos brought real musicianship to the part, having already performed alongside the Beach Boys before the show even started, which is part of why Jesse's rock and roll dreams never felt like a costume. Decades later, Stamos would say the hardest scenes to film were never the funny ones. They were the quiet ones, especially with Saget between takes. Their off-screen friendship became as well known as their on-screen one, and Stamos has spoken publicly and emotionally about the loss. Dave Coulier was the guy doing impressions in the corner of every scene, but underneath the cut-it-out gesture was the most consistently gentle character on the show. Coulier's real-life comedy career started in stand-up clubs and voiceover booths, not sitcom writers' rooms, and it shows in how loose and improvisational Joey always felt compared to the rest of the cast. He carried that same energy into hosting duties on America's Funniest People and into voice work on animated series aimed at kids, a natural extension of a character who basically never stopped performing for an audience of children. In recent years, Coulier has talked openly about beating cancer twice and shared in 2026 that he'd been told both were in remission. 30-plus years after the show ended, he's still the guy people root for, both on screen and off. Candace Cameron Bure was only a preteen when she became the responsible one, a role that, ironically, she'd end up carrying into real life as a producer, author, and eventually a talk show co-host. Her character's arc, first love, school pressure, the weight of being the oldest, mirrored her own real-time growing up, episode by episode in front of millions of viewers. Jodie Sweetin was barely 5 years old, too young to understand she was creating a catchphrase that would outlive most TV slang by decades. Underneath How Rude was a character quietly working through the absence of a mother figure. Something Sweetin has said resonated more as she got older. She later became one of the most candid former child stars in Hollywood, writing openly about the messier parts of growing up on camera and using that honesty to build a second career as an author and speaker. And Michelle Tanner wasn't really one performer at all. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen split the role as infants, alternating scenes so neither would go over the strict child labor filming limits. What started as a practical casting solution turned both girls into 2 of the most recognizable faces in entertainment before they were even old enough for school. 2 decades later, they walked away from acting almost entirely to build one of fashion's most quietly respected labels, a pivot almost nobody saw coming from 2 former child stars. Lori Loughlin's Aunt Becky wasn't part of the original pitch. The character was added because the writers wanted someone who could match Stamos's energy on screen without the relationship becoming predictable. It worked so well that Aunt Becky stopped being a character name and became a nickname fans used for Laughlin herself, long before the show even ended. Becky's arc, falling for a man not ready to be a father, then slowly becoming exactly the partner and mother he needed, gave the show some of its most grounded, least gimmicky storytelling. Laughlin carried that same warmth into a long career of television films and family dramas in the years that followed. Not everyone who mattered to the Tanner family stuck around for seasons. Doris Roberts appeared exactly once as Danny's visiting mother and still managed an Emmy-caliber performance about aging, independence, and wanting to feel needed, before going on to become one of television's most decorated mothers on Everybody Loves Raymond. Sorrel Book, already famous elsewhere as a loud, cigar-chomping Southern sheriff, turned up for a single Christmas episode as a grumpy stranger who turns out to be Santa Claus, one of the show's most quietly beloved twists to this day. And Jack Crushen, an Oscar nominee decades before he ever set foot in the Tanner house, gave Papuli's farewell episode a weight that still gets mentioned on saddest sitcom episodes lists, proof that a 4-episode arc can leave a bigger mark than some full seasons. Marcia Wallace popped in briefly as Mrs. Carruthers, but most people actually know her voice from somewhere else entirely. She spent over 2 decades as a sharp-tongued teacher on one of the longest-running animated sitcoms in television history. Yvonne Wilder, who played Jesse's mother, had already stood alongside major stars in a landmark 1960s musical film before ever meeting the Tanners, and continued working as a comedian, painter, and sculptor well outside her acting career. And Denise Dowse, remembered by Full House fans for a single preschool interview scene, would go on to shape the careers of dozens of young actors as a respected mentor and acting teacher, a legacy arguably bigger, in terms of lives touched, than any single acting role she ever played. What's remarkable looking back is how differently everyone's story continued. Some cast members leaned all the way into nostalgia, returning for a full sequel series decades later. Others quietly stepped away from the spotlight entirely. A few became more famous for what they did after Full House than for the show itself, and a handful are only remembered by the most devoted fans, despite having full, decorated careers everywhere else. That's really what separates this cast from a lot of sitcom ensembles. Almost nobody peaked in the Tanner house. They just started there. Different ages, different careers, different endings. But for 8 seasons, they were all one family. Some are gone, some are still working. One pair quietly became fashion icons who almost never discussed the show at all. That's the strange magic of Full House. It made family mean something even for the people who only visited the set once. Which cast member's story surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more deep dives like this one, and we'll see you in the next video.